Okay, let's begin. 18b3, Rabotai. We are up to the Gemara is now discussing the last thing that we mentioned, which is that Rabbi Meir was a bit of a freak of nature, kind of like Rabbi Amari, Rabbi Meiri, Rabbi Meir, similar things, right? Different, they were built differently. Rabbi Meir could close his eyes and see all of the Torah in front of him. He knew all of it by heart. The Gemara still said, even though that's the case, a person is not allowed to write any of the Sefarim of any of the books of Scripture, any of the 24 books, without having something in front of them to be able to copy it from, so that God forbid we shouldn't have any mistakes enter into the text. The Gemara says, we pointed out last time that it's less of a worry in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Why? Because in Torah Sheba'al Peh there's a conversation, we could argue it out, we could see Svara. When it comes to the word of the written Torah, in any of it's written, like, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the Pasuk is what the Pasuk is. You can't come and be like, oh, I think it should be like this, or maybe, there's no conversation to be had. So therefore the authenticity of the text is primary. So the Gemara said at the time that you have to have, it needs to be written from the Ktav. Says the Gemara, Abaye shara ledebe bar habu. Abaye allowed this certain group of people that used to be in charge of writing tefillin and mezuzot, lemichtav tefillin and mezuzot shelo min haktav. He allowed them to write tefillin and mezuzot, which are they're not the 24 books. So this does not contradict what we just said earlier. That was about the 24 books: Yoshua, Shoftim, Daniel, Ezra, etc., etc. However, he would let them write tefillin mezuzot shelo min haktav, not from the ketav. The Gemara says, "Kiman, who's that going according to?" The Gemara answers, "Ki hay Tana wa."
Rav Chizda was the ruling.
Rav Chizda was, that was already post.
Oh, he's not. Oh, okay.
That was already post. Ki hay Tana. This goes according to the Tana. The Tanya, because it says in a Braita, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Mishum Rabbeinu. Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Rabbeinu, Dahainu, usually that's Rebbe. Tefillin mezuzot nichtavot shelo min haktav. You're allowed to write tefillin mezuzot even though you're not writing it from a kitab, from something that's written in front of you. And they don't need to have those scratch marks where you normally see that each line has a scratch mark on it. They do not require it. What's the halacha? Tefillin and tzichin sirtut. Tefillin do not need sirtut. Mezuzot tzichin sirtut. Okay? So the halacha is that tefillin do not need and mezuzah does need. So we explained already yesterday, or 2 days ago, that when we say that it doesn't need, what we're referring to is the lines inside the box. But the outer line at the top, down the sides and the bottom, like the box on the piece of parchment, the outermost, lines, that it still requires. What was the reason why they had sirtut? There were two reasons. One of the reasons we described was to turn something into a sefer. That's what created this status of being a sefer as opposed to just being random writing. But there's also a broader understanding of Ze Eli V'Anveu, that when you look at the Torah, all of the columns are uniform. So imagine if one of them was wider, one of them started higher, etc., etc. So there was an element of Ze Eli V'Anveu, of glorifying and beautifying the mitzvot, that requires, even when there's no sirtut on individual lines, which is what the Gemara just brought from the Braita. So tefillin and tzichin sirtut means only the square. Mezuzot tzichin sirtut, mezuzot need every single line. So you're writing on lines, if you will.
Megilla uniform throughout. Everyone's scroll is the same, like the same lines and words on a page, like
no.
Everyone's Torah is the same.
No, so no, not necessarily. No. And the proof for that is we always talk about how the idea is that it's good to start with HaMelech, which means that it was possible to not have that be the possibility. Okay? Idi v'idi nichtavot, both of them have to be written. Shalom and Achtav, both of them are allowed to be written. Shalom and Achtav, not from copying it specifically from another text. My Tama, the Gemara asks, why? What's the reason? Why? Migras grisim, because what's written in Tefillin, what's written in Mezuzah, something that everybody knows by heart. So since it's something that is so people are so fluent with, so therefore we did not make the requirement to write it from a ktav. I have a question. Tell me my question. Nope.
You're cutting my own question from yesterday.
Nope. What do we say about Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir knows everything. He knows how to write it by heart. And still, he was not supposed to write it by heart. Gemara's answer was that it was only because it was Sha'at Hadchak. There was no other option. Okay? So the Gemara used Rabbi Meir and that story and this halacha where Rav Chizda told Rav Chananel, he goes, I know that you know it all by heart. And you could write not just this, but all the Torah. And you wouldn't make any mistakes. Still, the Chachamim said it's Asur. Right? So Tefillin Mezuzot, so what do you mean? You know it. I know Tefillin Mezuzot like Rav Chananel knows the whole Torah. Like Rabbi Meir knows the whole Torah. So if they're not allowed because we just make a blanket rule, so why would we not make a blanket rule here too? Good question. Huh?
Probably the length.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe it's longer. There are some books that are very short.
Maybe you're required to know Shema by heart?
But it's not only Shema. On the Mezuzah, it's only Shema. In the Tefillin, there's other parashas. There's four parashot right? in the Shel. You don't got it?
No, doesn't make sense. Why?
Oh,
They're both contained in a vessel.
so
It's the same text, but it's the same text. That's also what doesn't make sense. The text that we're pulling from the Torah in there, it's the same text. There's nothing new. So it would even make more sense if you'd have to copy it.
you're almost there. You're almost there, Nathan. There's two reasons.
Two
What?
days in a row.
Huh?
From the 24 books,
Yeah.
you have a common rule across all of them that that has to be written from Ktav.
Good.
You can't have anything else.
Okay.
In the case of Mezuzah and Tefillin, it's only an excerpt, and from that, it's a different, I don't want to say level, but maybe classification, and so it's a different rule when you have it.
Why? Why is it classified different?
You have a one rule for everyone. You can't have everyone has to write.
I'm agreeing with you. So why would you break that rule for Mezuzah and Tefillin?
Because we want to make it easy for the people.
I would go with whoever said the length also, and the fact that
Okay.
It's an excerpt.
One answer is the length.
Lowering the cost for Amcha.
Yeah, we want to make it easy.
I like that idea. I don't think it costs more though to write it from a ktav.
You have to be more qualified.
Think back to your first answer. There's two reasons why you would write it from a ktav. One reason is so you don't make a mistake. But what did I say to you? Why is it so important that the Chachamim made it asur even when I know it by heart? Why? Why would they make it asur even when I know it by heart?
Just in case.
Just in case what? What are they so nervous about?
The word you added or
Lead to future problems.
Then they're worried about future problems. But Tefillin and Mezuzah, you're not reading from. It's closed. It's in a keli. It's in a vessel.
It's covered, and if there's a mistake, no one's going to copy from it and make another mistake.
Exactly.
One
That-
mistake.
Isn't that right? So you realize all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh. So this is like the 24 books, but it only has half of the problems. So therefore, in a scenario where you know everything, I'm not worried about you making a mistake. What are we worried about? You making a mistake in Tefillin and Mezuzot? That your Tefillin and your Mezuzah is not going to be kosher.
That's a riddle.
It's a good one though, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Saw that answer? Wow. See it. Wow.
All right, to get to the other side. The Gemara continues. Hayta ketuva besam. So if you remember the end of the Mishnah, let's go back for 1 second to the end of the Mishnah. We'll read the end of the Mishnah together, and then we'll see this Gemara. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm not going to lie.
Closed vessel right away.
You said it. You were so close, right out the gate. Okay. 2 days in a row. So close. So close.
Comes from the guy not having the Gemara. Of course.
Knock on heaven's door. Okay. Right, so let's look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, right at the end, so it's on page 17b1. So the Mishnah says, Sorry, 17A4, whatever. 17A. It's all the same on the Hebrew side, right? The Mishnah says, look at the end of the Mishnah. Hayta kituva b'sam u'b'sikra u'b'kumus u'b'kankantum ala niyar v'ala diftera lo yatsa shte kituva ashurit ala sefer u'b'dio. So the Mishnah says, you can't write with these inks, and you can't write on these writing receptacles. I don't know what you would call things. What is the grouping of all things that you could possibly write upon? I'm not sure. Okay, but you can't. I don't know. I can't think of a specific word that would encompass all of those. But you can't write. You can write on with this. You can't write with these inks and with this groups of these two things that you're not allowed to write on or upon. However, what does it need? Not fulfill your obligation. Until it's written in Hebrew, ala sefer u'bidyo. So Hebrew is not part of this. Hebrew is going back on the beginning of the Mishnah when we had the whole question: are you allowed to write it in another language? Which languages are you allowed to write it in? Are you writing it in that language or in Hebrew, etc., etc.? So we've done with the Ashurit. But the point of this conversation is until it's written, you're not yotzeh until it's written ala sefer u'bidyo, on parchment and with dio, and with black ink. Okay, so that's what the Mishnah says. Now let's come back over here. The Mishnah says,
And the script that you use, the font that
Ashurit. So Ashurit, we said, does not describe a font in the Mishnah. Even though we were asking that maybe it could or should, but the Mishnah is using the word Ashurit just to mean Hebrew. Because you see it's contrasting Loazit, which is a foreign language, Lashon Avodah Zarah, with Ashurit. Okay, says the Gemara, Hayta ktuva b'sam. If it was written in Sam, what's Sam? Sam is a school on the Upper East Side. What's Sam? Sama, says the Gemara. Sam is a orpiment. It's a type of ink. But this kind of ink is made out of some sort of sulfuric whatever. It's like a brownish ink. Okay, Sama. Sikra, says the Gemara. Rabba bar Bachana, what does that mean? Rabba bar Bachana, Sikrita, what is that? Shema. So Sikra is Sikrita. What's Sikrita? It says over here in the translation, vermilion. I didn't know what that was.
Red.
It's red.
I thought it was green.
Vermilion is red. Okay? If they use like a certain type of it's called cinnamon burr, I think is what they use. And they use that to be able to create a reddish writing. Kumus kuma, says the Gemara. What if you have kumus? You can't use kumus. What's kumus? Kumus comes from the sap of a tree, and that's like a yellow ink. Okay. Now, so what have we described? We've described effectively three different colors: brown, red, and yellow. None of those inks are viable. Says the Gemara, kankantum. What about kankantum? Kankantum is actually black. But that is charta de ushkefi. It's the black coloring agent that they would use to dye the leather of the shoes. Okay? So now, it's very, very important. Now, that's not good. What do you mean? It's black. What's the problem? The halacha is very interesting. The reason why kankantum is not allowed is because it's used as a dye. Therefore, its purpose is not as to be able to write. Its purpose is to have the permanence of it penetrating the leather. Now, fascinating. You'd think that that's good, not bad. However, we learn from the word ketiva by sota. By sota, it talks about the writing. And what does it say that we have to do with this writing? We need to be able to scratch it, to erase it from the page in the story of the sota. So you see that whenever we talk about writing in a biblical or in a scriptural sense, we are talking about a writing that's possible to have by it in erasing. Because you see that it says that you would erase that by sota. Now, I'm thinking, and this is the way I'm thinking, I don't know if you realize, what do you mean? In what way are we erasing by a sota? Anyone know?
We dissolve the letters of Hashem's name.
So what do you mean dissolve? They actually scratch off the ink, and they take the ink and they mix it into this drink. Okay? Now, if you're talking about an ink that stains a parchment, you can't scratch off the ink. It's just that the parchment itself is now stained black, correct? So, what, sorry?
No.
Go ahead.
A lot of ink, and maybe ink for the Torah, sits on top of the parchment and is lightly or medium attached. But if you, in old Torah scrolls, you can chip the letters off.
No, that's exactly my point. So the Torah writing is not a die.
Right.
That was my point. So if you had a dyed piece of leather, there would be no way to scrape it out. There's nothing to scrape out. It's not bullet. It doesn't stick out.
It might even go all the way through.
It might go,
be really bad.
but regardless of how deep it goes, the point is that the writing of Kankantum was completely absorbed, and therefore it was something that was not that would never be able to. And here's the point: it would have to not be able to have on top of the. It would not be able to sit on top of the leather or of the parchment, because if it was, then you'd be able to scratch off kankantum as well for the story of the sotah, which is a scratching of that which sticks off from the top. So, however, we have so far 3 different colored inks that you can't use, kind of like at those official documents has to be with black ink, But with one extra requirement that the black ink also needs to be something which is scrapable or erasable. The Gemara now shifts. Now that we've discussed the inks that it can't use, right? It has to be dio, which is a black ink. What can you not write upon? The Gemara says the first thing you can't write upon is diphthera. Diphthera is regular parchment. It's just that it's not completely me'ubad. Me'ubad means processed, okay? So what is diphthera? What has happened to diphthera that it's not finished? The Gemara says dimaliach, that it was salted. V'kamiach, and they used the flour on it as well. So it was salted and they used the flour. Velo afitz, but they didn't use gallnuts. So what are gallnuts? Gallnuts is some sort of a process that happens in the where plants and earth meet together. It's some sort of I think it's a parasitic process that happens, and they use this in dyes. But what's very interesting is that the gallnut dye is not a dye of color; it's a clear tannin. Okay, so what you're doing is you're putting this on the parchment to be able to create almost like a shine and a very clean, like a lacquer almost type onto the parchment. So diphthera is a parchment that has not had that final process happen to it. So that's diphthera is one step short of parchment. Okay, so diphthera you can't use, and the second thing you can't use is niyar machaka. What's that? What is that? What is this idea? That's papyrus. So what's papyrus? Not just a font in Microsoft Word. Papyrus is a reed. It was actually the origin of it was in Egypt. They would take the base of these reeds, which was like a thick base of this swamp growing reed, and then they would basically take like strips of it, and they would put one strip this way, and then one strip that way, one strip this way, one strip that way, and then they would let it dry. And once it would dry, they would actually hammer it down. And when it would dry, then in the sun, after being hit together. So the interesting thing is, I don't know if you've ever had the bottom of a plant. Sometimes it's got that little sticky. It's almost like a gluey substance. So the glue would take those different, the sheti va'erev, the crisscross, and it would actually bind them together. So the whacking of the hammer would press it together. The glue inherent in the process would keep it stuck together. It was a fairly advanced process, and it would create like a hard piece of paper. And this was the primary usage of how they would write in ancient Egypt, and then later on as well in Rome. Okay, that was papyrus. Okay, and that's why, by the way, the font papyrus in Microsoft Word is designed to look like a Roman, like a script of an ancient script, or a script that you'd find in the Egyptian past. Okay, so you can't use this kind of paper. You can't use the unfinished parchment. That's what the Mishnah means when it says ad, until it's written ala sefer ubidio. The Gemara continues.
Sefer also means with the outline.
So it's not coming to be mehayev the scoring, correct? It's coming to tell me that you have to use that kind of a paper. But yes, we would also learn that. Why am I saying that it's not coming to tell you about scoring? specifically because the fact that it's already a sefer in and of itself would mean that you wouldn't need the scoring, right? Okay. Now, says, again, the fact that you don't need it doesn't mean that you don't do it, right? Because you still have the Ze Eli Van Veo, and a lot of times...
Can you write a get with this permanent dye, black permanent dye?
I don't know. I'll tell you why I don't know. Because, well, you know what? Actually, I'm jumping the gun. Let's take a look in 1 second, and you'll see in a minute why I'm saying I don't know. The Gemara says, until it's written in Hebrew, tichtiv kichtavam uchizmanam. That the Jewish people would keep this tradition. How? Kichtavam, as it was written, uchizmanam. So you see that there was a premium placed, a point placed on the fact that they're going to keep it as it's written. How is it written in the original form? In Hebrew. So therefore, we need to be faithful to the original ktav because the remembrance of what happened was said in an expression of kichtavam as they were written. It didn't say they would remember the story as it happened. It said they would remember the story as the story was written. So it made the remembrance dependent on the way that story had been captured, if you will. Okay? Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, ala sefer b'dio on parchment with ink, says the Gemara, minalan. How do you know that you need parchment? How do you know that you need parchment and you need ink? The Gemara says, at yaktiva ktiva. We learn a gzera shava. What's a gzera shava? We've had this many times. Gzera shava is you have a word over here. You have the same word over here. Okay? It's not even the specific same word. So you could have the word kitav and the word ktiva. Or, vayichtov and the word vatichtov. It's not that it's the same exact word, but the word was used here and the word was used here. And if over here I'm given a definition of what that means, so then I could extrapolate that that's what that means over here too. However, this is not a classic Gzera Shava, and let me explain why.
Those came from Moshe.
Sorry?
Those came from Moshe and Sinai.
Yes, so all Gzera Shava actually have to have been handed down in the tradition passed down. So it can't be that you find a word here and you find a word there and you're like, oh, same word. I'm making up new halachot now. I'm bringing those halachot over here because it's the same word. You can't do that. So traditional Gzera Shava is a Gzera Shava that was handed down in the Mesorah. Those Gzerot Shavot are dafka in a Torah on a Torah basis. Here we're learning Gzera Shava to from a sefer in Ketuvim, which is the Megillah of Esther, to a pasuk in the Navi, which is the Navi in Yirmiyah. So let's take a look. It says over here, Ktiv Hacha.
Moshe, if it's from Purim.
Absolutely, that's my point. It can't be a Mesorah from Moshe Rabbeinu if this only happened after. I mean, technically it could, but it would be prophetic at that point. Ktiv Hacha, it says over here, V'tichtov Esther HaMalka, and Esther HaMalka wrote, Uchtiv Hatam, and it says over there, where's over there? In Yirmiyah. Vayomer lahem Baruch, and Baruch said to them, Mipiv Yikra Elai, he spoke to me, called out to me with his mouth, and I wrote, called him Va'ani Kotev, and I was writing ala Sefer Bidyo. I was writing on parchment with Bidyo, with this black ink. Now, let's just be clear. Who is this Baruch fellow? Anyone know?
Navi?
Sorry?
Navi.
So Baruch is Baruch ben Neriah. Baruch ben Neriah is a student of Yirmiyahu's. And after Yirmiyah tells the story about how the Jewish people are going to be banished from the land of Israel, God tells Baruch, okay, go down, acquire for yourself a piece of land in Israel, write up a shtar, a contract, that you own this piece of land. Why was Hashem doing that? To illustrate to the people that you're coming back. So you're leaving, this is the cheapest real estate for a Jewish person to own. You're leaving, no one's going to be here anymore, right? So since that's the case, what must the instruction to Baruch ben Neriah to buy this piece of land and to write a contract about it be about? It must be that we're going to come back and inherit that piece of land. And what does it say in that pasuk of Baruch ben Neriah? Write it down ala sefer, on parchment, ubidyo. And that's the language, that's actually the language we're capturing in the Mishnah. We're literally saying, what does it mean? Ad sheyeh b'sefer ubidyo. Those are the words of the actual pasuk in Yirmiyah. So since it says, Vayichtov, it means on a parchment with ink. So also over there, it means on a parchment with ink. I have one problem. I don't expect you to get this problem, so I'm not going to leave you hanging. I have one problem. Here's my problem. If this Gzera Shava was from Misorah, that means that Moshe Rabbeinu said on Mount Sinai, he told Yoshua, there's going to be a book, and it's going to have this word, and there's going to be another book, and it's going to have that word, and you're going to draw a parallel. So then we'd have a Misorah telling us to be Doresh this Gzera Shava. However, as we've said already earlier, this is not a classic Gzera Shava, so it's almost like a borrowing of terms. The Gemara on page 2 in Masechet Baba Kama tries to figure out the meaning of a word. And the Gemara uses something to prove its point. And it says, oh, look, we find the... You want to pass me a Baba Kama? Right there. You got one? Okay. Gemara Baba Kama. Yeah.
Like you were prepped.
The Gemara is trying to figure out what nigicha is. What's nigicha? What does it mean to gore? It just says that you can't goring. That's one of the things. What does that mean? En nigicha ela bekeren. The only way the word nigicha is referenced by goring with a horn, like for a bull. Shneimar, like it says, Vayas lo Tzidkiah ben Kenana karne barzel. This guy Tzidkiah was a false prophet. He made himself horns out of iron. Vayomer, and he told the people falsely, Ko amar Hashem, so did God say, Ba'ele tinagach et Aram. With these horns, you're going to gore Aram, your enemies. Vegomer. Ve'omer, and it says, Bechor shoro hadar lo, ve'karnere em karnav, behem amim yinagach. Now the Gemara says, Mai ve'omer, why does it say ve'omer? Why does it bring a second pasuk? That when you're trying to learn out a biblical premise, you can't learn it out midivrei Kabbalah, which means from the words of the prophets or the words of the Ketubim, right? If you think that that's the case, Tashma, let me prove to you. Ask the Gemara. So we brought another pasuk. Ask the Gemara, V'hai melefu, is this learning it out? Gilui milta be'almau. It's not a learning of a gzera shava. It's gilui milta be'alma. Rashi says, what does it mean, gilui milta? What does that concept mean? Ela gilui milta. Gilui milta. D'chol hechi d'chtiv negicha be'kerenu. So if I tell you in Nach that nigicha, that goring means with a horn, so if I now find another place where it talks about goring, I automatically know that means with a horn. Because you see from the pasuk that's how the word is being used. It's almost like a casual limud, not a halachic one.
Well, you learned from there, so we can learn here too.
Right, but it's not an official learning of like a halacha of the Yud Gimel Midot Shatorah Nidreshet Bahem. Right? We're not learning out of it like Gzera Shava, Binyan Av, none of that. We're just saying, what does it mean when it says goring? I have a pasuk over here. It might be in Nivim or Ketuvim, but that pasuk says that the person is goring, and when he gores, the animal's goring with a horn. So now I know, anytime it says Negicha, that's what it means. So too over here, it says Ktiva by Esther. And therefore, since this is not a normal Gzera Shava, where we have a tradition that this is where we have to learn it from here to here, therefore we just understood that to be like a Gilui Milta. Like letting you know that whenever it says writing, it means writing with ink on parchment. I have a problem with that.
Where else does it say kitab?
Well, I'm going to talk about one specifically. I mean, Chumash.
If you want, Rabbi.
Pull another one.
Let's give it to me.
Right? Moshe Rabbeinu writes on a stone.
Right.
God writes on a stone,
We learn here the letters went through.
right?
Yeah.
So you find the word writing, and it don't mean ink, and it don't mean paper, it doesn't mean parchment.
But in the Megillah,
So
they send it
if
on.
there's, sorry?
Oh.
It's in Devarim.
In the Megillah, doesn't it say they send out the letters? Could you be pulling it from there because it says letters there?
What do you mean?
When they send out
Thank
the letter
you.
that this happened with this and this, doesn't say that it should be written and they sent it out to the people. The decree was over. So
Okay.
The decree, does it say it's written on a parchment there?
No, but it could have been written on, they used to write on stone tablets. They were called cuneiform, right? Right? They were written on these stone tablets. They would send you a stone tablet. You had to put on extra stamps, right? But they did. That's how they sent it out like that. Exactly. Right? Don't forget the stamps.
Are you saying that when Moshe wrote on the stone in the 70 languages at the Jordan, and when Hashem, quote unquote, wrote the 10 Commandments, the word is kitav?
It also uses the word to write, yeah, the language of ketiva. So therefore, once it uses the language of ketiva for other random things, which are not specifically ink and parchment, so how did you know to go to this specific pasuk, which is about parchment and paper, and decide parchment and ink, and choose this one specifically? You like that question? I don't have a good answer. I don't have a good answer. I have a answer.
You go,
I have a answer. I don't have a good answer.
when you go on the level from
Credit.
Tuvim to Megillah, rather than on the level of Chumash to Chumash?
What do you mean? Why would you say that?
Maybe you can only do Gezerah Shava on things that are more or less the same level.
That's part of the problem here. It's not a Gzerah Shava. If it was a Gzerah Shava, I have no problem. You know why? Because we have a tradition telling you that you should learn Pasuk A from Pasuk T. Fine. So not Pasuk B, but Pasuk T. But without that, where are we drawing this from? Why are we deciding to go with one and not the other? I can't find this here. It's like one Pasuk on a page.
Also, isn't it?
Legit.
Sorry.
No, it's not your
I
fault.
couldn't find
It's
that.
not your fault.
Maybe when Hashem,
We should have let Jeff do it.
maybe when Hashem writes, it's a different quality of writing than when we write.
No, but Moshe was writing on the stone. That was Moshe, not God.
Back in it points back to 2b, and it says that the Ritva says that in the case of our Gemara, it's not a Gever Sheva because the Gezerah Sheva is only effective in linking two pentatactual
Pentateuch.
two passages. As in our Gemara, its intent is here is only to demonstrate the meaning of the word.
Right. So that's literally what we get. That's literally what I said earlier.
Right, so
It's not a Mesorah, it's a Gilui Milta, which means we're just trying to find the explanation, a revelation of what the word means. Gilui Milta. Problem is that there are many other examples of Ktav,
Right. We had it before Parzi. That was the word that it said.
Prazeh. Yeah.
Parzi, right.
Yeah.
Unworldly.
Okay. So I don't have a good answer. I have one answer though.
I want to hear one.
Your Kiddush?
Well, it's chidush, yeah. This is one chidush. My one answer is that we decided to learn like from like, not in terms of time, but in terms of purpose. The Jewish people were going into exile. What was the purpose of the writing of Baruch ben Neriah? For it to get passed on. That was the point. For it to be passed on, the story, and for people to have, to be uplifted, etc., etc. In each scenario, the concept was that this needed to be read again and again. The ketiva of Moshe Rabbeinu on the luchot was going to be hidden inside the Aron. The writing on the stones that they put in the Jordan was meant to be a monument. No, that's not where you went to learn. So the Megillah, which was supposed to be used in every single iteration, in every single city, everyone had to have a Megillah in every city because they needed the Megillah. So it didn't make sense. It makes more sense to learn it from another place where we were using the same, where the purpose was the same thing. To take a document that you would take with you. Baruch ben Neriah was going to leave Israel right afterwards. You're not building, you're not writing on stone. That wasn't something you would do for portability. Yes?
You have two different media. You have stone media and you have parchment.
Okay.
So you learn parchment from parchment and stone from stone.
No.
We don't learn
No.
from stone to parchment.
No. That's chicken and egg territory. We don't know what to write Esther on. If we knew Esther was parchment, you can learn parchment to parchment. We're proving Esther is parchment from the one instance of parchment. From Baruch ben Neriah. So you can't say parchment to parchment. I don't know what this is. This is a question mark. This could have been stone or parchment, depending on where you went.
It's like this, the hardcover Gemara and soft cover. This we were taking with us, the hardcover we put in our room.
Exactly. Okay.
That's your purpose answer.
So the logic is that we looked at a case, not where something was being done for in a symbolic way or an emblematic way, like the luchot. The luchot were not designed for everyone to have a pair and to take it with you. And the luchot were designed to show in this monumental show of kedusha, God giving the Torah to the Jewish people. The stones were designed to be the Jewish people's entry into the land of Israel. Build these giant stones, write the Torah on it in 70 languages. Ba'er hetev. That was some sort of like monolithic, the Jewish version of, the Torah version of Mount Rushmore. Okay? That's not something that you took with you as you went into exile. Baruch ben Neriah, it would have had to be a scroll because everyone needed to take it he would have needed to take it with him. Same thing, we're looking at the story of Megillah. The story of Megillah is something that they promised, kichtavam uchizmanam. And that's, my friends, what I think the second part of the pasuk is here. Take a look 1 second. Let's look back at the Gemara right before this Gemara. The Gemara says, yes,
Megillah?
yeah. The Gemara says, Ad shte ktuva ashurit, until it's written in Hebrew, dichtiv, because it says, kichtavam uchizmanam. In their writing and kizmanam. Now, I have one question on that. What's my question?
They spoke Farsi.
Nope. Such a good question, though. Not my question. What's my question? My question is, which word do you need in order to prove that it had to be written in Hebrew?
Right.
Kichtavam.
Yeah.
What does kizmanam have to do with anything? The answer is that the point of kichtavam kizmanam is, I want you to read it in Hebrew. And I have to tell you to read it only in Hebrew. Why? Because I know that in 10 years from now you're going to be in Spain, and in 30 years from now you'll be in Portugal, and in 50 years from now you're going to be in France, and in 100 years from now you're going to be in America. Kichtavam uchizmanam is telling you in this language, uchizmanam, no matter what time it is. So already the Gemara was setting you up with the answer by giving you a seemingly unnecessary word in the Derashah. Chizmanam. So we taught you already now, it's Hebrew no matter what you go through, in all of your errors. Chizmanam. Then we ask the Gemara next question. Baruch ben Neriah, ktiva ktiva. Why am I learning that? Because kichtavam, kizmanam. It was meant to be a ktiva that would survive the Jewish people's travails and exiles over time. And that would have to be Sefer al Sefer Ubidio.
You could also go one step further in your argument.
Baruch Adonai Le'olam.